Magic makers. This is a conversation that I've wanted to have for a really long time. Okay, I know. I told you I made a list of 100 things I wanted to talk about on this podcast a few years ago, and I am actively ticking them off. And this one right here is one that's near and dear to my heart because it happened to me, and it happened to our current guest, Dr. Wendie Trubow, about endocrine disruptors and all the toxicity that is around us, both emotionally and physically. And it is such a hidden topic that I don't think many of us really understand or really can kind of like unpack the multiple layers that is toxicity. So, Dr. Wendie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Kim. Feel free
Yeah.
to call me Wendy too. You don't have to call me doctor. I mean, you
No, I
can, but
like to start it off doctor and then be like, all right, we've got a rapport going here.
yeah.
She's
You're
just
my
Wendy.
bestie. You can call me Wendy.
Exactly. So Wendy, as I do, I creep on my guest. And so as I do,
I love
not
it.
like I'm a lazy stalker. Like I won't show up in your shower or in your back seat because that just requires work. But I
Right.
can let my fingers do the Googling.
You can't be remote. You can't be socially distanced if you do that. It's like totally not PC any longer.
Yeah, I was socially distanced before that was a word.
Yeah, I never liked big crowds. And then COVID hit and I was like, well, I have an excuse now.
I
But
was like,
I never liked it.
right, don't leave your house. Okay. How hard is
Right.
that? Not very. So as I was reading up on you, how first of all, you are a functional gynecologist by
Yeah.
trade, but how you got into this whole, toxicity thing was because it happened to you.
Yep.
And
My mess
so,
is my message.
yeah. So how did this start to like manifest itself? And did it happen when you were a doctor, or it has been kind of like you know, a long time coming?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Kim. So I think there's two answers to that. I don't mean to speak with a forked tongue, but when I look back, I can go, oh, I really did have some of these problems for a
Yeah.
long time, like back into childhood,
Yeah,
long
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But I had zero awareness or understanding of any of it. So it didn't occur for me like I had a problem. It just occurred to me like I was just
This is
not
how
as
well you were.
constitutionally, and I was just this way. I was like this, right? And so asthma was normal, right? And
Right.
what acne was normal, and not having really good hair was normal. Like all that stuff was normal because I just didn't have any insight into any of it.
Right.
But I wasn't sick. I just wasn't optimal.
Right. Right.
Right. So it wasn't bad enough. I always think we cross a line, like it gets
Yeah.
bad enough and then we're a problem, but it
It's
wasn't
more
bad
of an
enough.
annoyance than a problem.
Right. So when I look back, I had all these issues for a long time, but then I really hit the skids when I was 48.
Mm.
And then my mess became my message because we went on vacation. And even then, when I look back, I was like, oh, I was having some symptoms, but then it got really bad. So
Right.
we go on vacation to France for a week. And the month after we come home, like a switch was flipped. I gained 9 pounds. What said no woman ever is like, oh yay, let me gain nine
Right.
pounds, right? So I gained 9 pounds. My hair starts falling out in crazy droves. I had already noticed it,
Right.
but it got even worse.
Right.
And then I had this rash on my face that would not quit. Like, the kind you wake up and you're scratching your eyes, and I'm like,
Right.
oh my God, like my eyes were red. And I had that. My mom's like, what's wrong with you? You look like, your nose is running all the time. I'm like, well, it kind of
It
is.
is.
It was all gross. So, I've been doing functional medicine for a while now. And I started to do the workup on myself. So I did my thyroid because everyone sits in my office like I have a
Right.
thyroid problem. I'm like, oh sister, you do not have a thyroid problem, you have a
Right.
toxins problem, but I'll prove to you.
Yeah.
So I checked my thyroid, it's perfect. I checked my hormones because I'm 48 at the
Right.
time, and they were amazing. So I
Right.
can't blame it on like perimenopause,
Right.
which I did.
Yeah.
And then I did a stool test, and I have celiac and leaky gut and all these issues, but it looked pretty good.
Right.
So okay, that's not it. And then I was listening to the radio and I heard this report about how when Notre Dame burned down, it released 500 pounds of lead dust into the air.
Oh, and you were just there.
I was there the week after it burned down. And I remember saying to my husband, it's so dusty here, man. And then I was like, that's because we got a lead exposure, because we were right there for a week. And I got sick right after we came home.
Yeah.
And it probably didn't help. We were in England and it's moldy in England, and I have a mold
Yeah.
issue too. So you put it together, it's like a hungry and
It was like the
tired
perfect
toddler.
storm.
Perfect storm, trifecta of bad combination. Really not what you
Yeah.
want. So I at that moment, that was like a few months after we came home, and I had really, I can't say I was pulling my hair out because I didn't have enough pull out. It's like, don't touch. So I then did the heavy metals test on myself, and I had been, okay, so here's where doctors are bad patients, Kim. I had
Yeah.
been mildly positive in the past for lead. Our
Right.
cutoff is 8. I was 9, and I'm like,
It's 9.
ah,
Yeah.
what am I going to do? A 3-month program just to take 1 point off? Like,
Right.
this is how okay. Knowing now what I didn't know then, I should have treated it 9. Okay. I'm just,
Right.
don't blow off what your doctor blows off. It's bad. So it was 9. And then I retested, it was 12. That got my attention. 25% increase. That caught my attention. So I said to my husband, I got a lead exposure. You all got a lead exposure, but I don't have the brain space to deal with you. I'm going to deal with myself.
Right. And
so,
then I'll catch you guys up.
Yeah, someday, right? I haven't gotten to them yet because I'm still like dealing with myself. So I started the protocol and the treatment, and the process also did all the other testing, because there's the heavy metals, there's the mycotoxins, and then there's the other, all the other stuff, because that's only 2 categories of toxins. Then there was all the other bucket, which is pesticides, makeup, nail polish, flame retardants, water quality, gasoline fumes, you name it.
Yeah.
I was positive for like half of it, and the numbers are really freaking high. And I looked at my husband, I went, I'm such a dirty girl. And I went, oh, we're writing that book.
Yeah.
And I think you said this is airing on the 1-year anniversary of our book. So it's so exciting. Dirty Girls, our book. It's been out for a year. So my mess became my message, and that became my passion play, because a lot of us are working really hard to be healthy, and we don't understand, like, why can't I lose the weight? Why don't I look and feel the way I want to look and feel? Often it's because of toxins.
Yeah. And, I want to touch on that, because one of the things how I was, like you said, your mess becomes your message. And that was me, because, we all think about, like, as we're gaining weight, we just think it's food. We're like, it's the food that's making me put on this extra weight. And no one realizes that, our bodies are smart, and, smarter than we give it credit for. But like all the, like you talked about, like all the toxins, all the chemicals, all of the things that our bodies, like, I have no idea what this is. They just shove it into fat.
Yeah.
And it's it's our attic, right? All of us have that attic or that room that you just throw shit into, and you're like, I'll get to it someday. And as we start to lose the weight, that someday starts to come out of the closet. And our bodies are still like, I still don't know what this is. And it's still shoveling it back into the closet. And so one of the things I was like, well, what do you mean these hidden toxins? And I think, you touched on it, like nail polish. Who doesn't get their nails done? And you don't think about it. Sitting in the nail salon, smelling all that crap. You don't think about it.
Hair dyes.
Hair dye, the other thing that was really, if we kind of go back to how it kind of started, that talk started, was the water bottles, right? It was the whole thing about BPAs. It was like, you shouldn't drink out of plastic. And everyone's like, plastic? What do you mean? What's wrong with plastic? I have a whole host of Tupperware in my house. Like, what's going on with that? So what was kind of some of the things that kind of like pulled on that thread? Because I mean, if you think about it, for decades, all of this has been in our world.
Yeah. And you can't isolate. I don't think that you can say, oh, it's this one culprit.
No.
This is the one thing. I mean, obviously I had a one thing moment, but that's only because my rain barrel my closet was full.
Right.
I could not store any more toxins. My junk drawer was full.
Right.
So
and we all have our
it's rarely ever that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's rarely ever that clear. I just happen to have a clear thing. But for other women, it's just you started gaining weight and you can't figure it out. And sometimes it's subtle, right? Like,
yeah,
I'll go so far as to say that stress is a toxin.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Right? Emotional baggage is a toxin.
Yes. Yeah. We could do a whole show
Thought
on that.
processes.
Yes.
Yeah. So the way you think can be toxic. So there's a lot of stuff that you would say that's an environmental toxin.
Right.
But what I think you're talking about is what stuff are we exposing ourselves to that's harmful? And it is freaking horrifying.
It,
Okay.
it,
So
it,
yeah,
yeah. Once you open up that Pandora's box, like you're just like,
awful.
you want to shut it down, but like you
Yes.
can't because you're just like, it blows your mind what
Mhm.
has been allowed
Um,
for
So let's talk about the
decades.
ground rules.
Yeah.
The listeners have to have ground rules. One, this is a journey, not a process. You are not going to complete it overnight.
God, yes.
You're going to screw it up. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
get greenwashed, whitewashed, natural washed.
All
Don't be
washed.
mad at yourself.
Yes.
You'll get hogwashed. So don't be mad at yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Move on. Have so here, I'll tell you a story. I have been using the same cleaning product since I was a kid. It has green in the name of it. And that's as much as I'll say about what product it is. And it is green, actually. And my mom told me it was clean.
Yes.
I never thought about it. I literally didn't think about it. So like 2 years ago, my cleaners pull out my cleaning product. And I looked at that and I went, that is not clean. There is no way that something bright green is clean because it has something artificial in it. It's got really strong smells.
Right.
Why are we using that? Right. So I looked it up with Environmental Working Group and it was indeed not clean. But it's those moments where you go, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
You know?
There's, and I want to echo on that because my journey to this was, I remember I was fortunate enough to find a functional doctor who was like, girl, you have, I was estrogen dominant. He's like, you're estrogen dominant. He's like, we got to start getting some of these estrogen disruptors out of your system. And he's like, it's not going to be an all or nothing thing. He's like, every time you finish a product, get rid of it. He's like, 'cause I don't want you going out and spending thousands of dollars. He's like,
right.
He's like,
great approach.
Finish the product, get a new one. Finish the product, get a new one, so that you don't have all these like product wastelands living around. And for many people, I want you to think that's how we are, because like in our minds, we're like, I got to get rid of it all, but like it's too much.
No, that's what I advocate. As soon as when you're running out of something and you would have replaced it anyway, because you have to balance out all of this consumerism is really bad for the earth. So we have to balance our health and the earth's health are inextricably linked. So, what's good for us is good for the earth also. So
Right.
you don't want to just throw out thousands of dollars. It's wasteful. It's expensive. It's bad for the earth. It never degrades anyway. So
Right.
you use it up, absolutely use it up, but then get rid of it and get a better product.
Right. So let's go back. So let's talk about metals, right? Because if we think about metals, many of us, you had like, the burning of I don't know, was that built in like the 1800s?
We burned a church.
Yeah, I think that building.
No, I think it was early. I think it was like 1600s. It was old.
Yeah. So like, back then we didn't know anything in the 1600s. I think at that point we still were thinking the earth was flat. So we didn't know anything. And so, as we kind of, some of us might live in older homes or we're just around old things. Why should I care about being exposed to metals?
Okay, well, let me count the ways. So you want to go like not so bad to terrible, or you want to go terrible to not so bad? Which direction you want to go?
Oh, goodness.
You get a choice. Like, you have a choice about your learning.
Yeah, I know. Let's start with the not so bad.
Okay. Not so bad would be hair loss, weight gain. Is that not, to me, that's bad. When my hair fell out and I gained weight, I was like, whoa,
no, because all of us, have had that moment where you're like, you're combing your hair and like, our hair falls out just naturally.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, that's like a clump.
Right. I used to count the hairs and my hairdresser for months was like, your hair's fine, Wendie, cut it out. I said to her, I lost 67 hairs in the shower this morning. And she's like, oh, that's a lot. That's not normal. I'm like, and it happens every day. So, like 30 in the shower is okay because you lose 100 a day on average. But if you're losing 2/3 of it in the morning in the shower, you have a problem. Right. So hair loss and weight gain, those catch people's attentions.
Yeah,
right?
They do.
But those aren't the worst. Okay. So then let's kind of migrate down and you go, that stuff isn't going to kill you. It's just going to torture you.
Yes.
Then you move down the spectrum. You go heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel, autoimmune disease. Have I caught your attention yet?
Well, see, and here's the thing. And, as a functional doctor compared to a conventional doctor, if I go to my doctor and, I complain about weight gain, I complain about hair loss, there's a litany of other things it could be.
Sure. And we rule those all out.
Right. But I'm just saying, as you go to your conventional doctor, some of them will be like, oh, honey, oh,
Oh,
sweetie.
honey. Oh,
And you just like, or they'll just like, oh, it's just Crohn's disease. And they're just,
or you're just imagining it.
you're right. And they give you this kind of like this, Crohn's is this irritative disease that it's not just Crohn's disease. There's so many layers to Crohn's disease that you're like, okay, so now I have a label, but what does that mean?
Right.
And so as people go through this, it's like, I don't think a conventional doctor would ever say it's metals.
No, they just don't. They just don't have the tools in their toolbox to say that. That's just totally not where they've been trained.
Yeah.
Right. So let's progress. Okay. I would say the worst consequences of long-term toxin exposure or even metals exposure ends in the realm of, oh, and by the way, hearing loss is associated with metals, chronic stomach issues associated with metals. But then you walk down to the, like, we don't want to get that stuff. It's the cancer, the degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autoimmune diseases. I have celiac, it's autoimmune, but big whoop, right? I just don't eat gluten.
Right. But these are like more disruptive autoimmune.
Yeah, exactly. Disruptive, like multiple sclerosis kill you.
Right.
Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, like those things are going to kill you.
Right.
So really walking into the things that are going to cause your life to be shortened and the quality of it to be bad, right? It's not just about quantity, it's about the quality of the days.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, people are like, all right, okay, how would I know if I've been, you said you've done a heavy metal test, and if it was 8, you were at a 9. How would I go about getting a heavy metal test? Finding a doctor like yourself? Is it something that like I can do my own heavy metal test? Like how would I go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. First off, there are no other doctors like me.
Well, clearly.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
I know. I love
there's
it.
lots
right
of,
into it.
There's a lot like me. So what you're going to want to look for is a seasoned functional medicine doctor, senior level. So when you first start in functional medicine, you're dealing with the gut and the thyroid and the adrenals, and that's critical. That's a platform stuff. We do that with everyone. And then, you get through your career and you're like, okay, what else is there? There's toxins. So people who are into toxins are often, they've been doing it a while. They've seen everything. So you're going to want to find an old timer. I'm an old timer. Find an old timey like me. Okay. One, if you go to your conventional doctor, they're going to do a blood test on you. And I was talking to a cardiologist today about it. And he's like, I do it on everyone. I said, that's awesome. And you miss 99% of people who have a metals problem because the blood test only shows you what's acutely in your system that your body was exposed to before you either excrete it or store it.
Right.
It doesn't stay in your bloodstream. So if you have a positive screen, it's because you had an acute exposure within the last 4 to 6 weeks. That's a problem.
Right. So if you came back from Notre Dame and you had this blood test, you would have popped.
Yes.
But because it's been an iterative process for you, no one would have found it in your blood.
Right. 3 months later, nobody would have found it in my blood. So I'm not a huge fan of blood tests unless you think you had an acute exposure, in which case I'm like, oh my goodness, get a blood test.
Right.
You can do hair testing. I'm not a fan of that either, because that's, again, showing what your body is voluntarily getting rid of.
Right. Versus what's up in the attic.
But what's in your junk drawer. So the attic, the junk drawer. So I would say I'm a huge fan of you do a baseline, make sure there's no acute exposure. So baseline, and then provoked urine testing using Dmsa. And the reason is the Dmsa attaches to and pulls out lead and mercury, cadmium, thallium, arsenic, pulls out the nasty ones. And you can measure, what's in there. And just remember, it's not an exact science. So it's not, so, my 12 was a guidepost. I've got metals, I've got lead. My original test for mercury was like 9, again, mildly positive. And then I did the retest after I amped up the system, the arrogance of doctors. I did 6 weeks of my removal program, and I looked at my husband, and it was awful. I was like so tired, brain fog, couldn't concentrate. And at 6 weeks, it lifted. And I looked
Right.
at my husband. I said, my medals are gone, but I'll complete the program just so I know what my patients are going through.
Right.
Okay. So I do my retest. My medals are 4 times what they were. They were not gone. They were not anywhere near gone. But what you see on your first pass is like the indicator that you have medals.
Right.
And then you open up the floodgates.
Exactly.
And it comes pouring out.
Yeah.
And I was
now
like,
you're in the room. Now you're in the room. And
right
that's
now
where it begins.
I'm knee deep in water on this one. I was like,
Right.
oh man. So it takes a long time because I always say to people, it's like clearing a wall of bubble gum with tweezers.
Yeah, exactly.
One little piece at a time.
Well, we, as especially us women, we've been exposed to diet culture for so long, and we think in 30 days I'm gonna be fixed, and then you're like, girlfriend, you've been dealing with this for 30 years, like, so there's no way you're gonna be fixed in 30 days. Like 30 days, you might feel a little bit different, but we're still like chipping away.
Yes. Tweeze, come on out. There's this Eastern philosophy that says that it's going to take as long to fix the problem as it did to develop and recognize the problem. Exactly. So I say to people, it's not an overnight thing. It's a long process for some, some people like me, it's a long process. And then you have to keep maintaining because you're a crappy detoxer. And then some people take to it really easily and they need 2 rounds, they're done. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't like you any longer,
Right.
I'm still at it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, we have the medals part. The other thing I think a lot of women don't understand, and probably it's more prevalent than medals for a lot of people, is the endocrine disruptors.
Yeah, nasty boogers.
Yeah. And these are the ones that, for many of us are is what causes unexplained weight gain. As we're doing all the right things. These are the things that, like, just you're like, why does the weight just sit? Like, no matter how good you're being. So let's talk to people like, what are endocrine disruptors?
Sure. Let's drill into this too. So can we back up a step, Can
Sure.
we geek? Do your listeners like to geek out? Because I really love talking about the pathway.
I'd like to geek it out.
Okay.
Geek it out, because I feel like I didn't know this, and then I became this. If you would have told me I would be into biochemistry, I would have said, go jump into a lake, because I barely passed biology, but because they never put it in a way that I cared.
I remember in biochem in med school saying, where are we in the body? Just so I have some context here, because it was all just rote memorization.
Yes.
And for years I said, oh, I hate biochem, but really what I hated was the way it was taught.
That's exactly it. If we said, if you had a cold, these are the things that are being activated, I would have been like, oh,
so
I'm
cool.
in. Now it versus like, you had to learn all of these things. And I was just like, I remember like the Krebs cycle. And I was like, I never could catch it. And then this woman explained it to me. She's like, think of it like a Ferris wheel. And she's like, you're throwing people into the Ferris wheel. I was like, why couldn't Professor Pintavalli do that?
Yes, it makes sense finally, right?
Yeah.
So let's dive down that. It's so cool. You can't unsee this pathway. Let's go there for a minute. Your body is designed to keep you healthy. And one of the critical organs is your liver. So your liver takes toxins. Now, most toxins are fat soluble. Hormones are fat soluble. And what your body does is your liver takes it from fat soluble to water soluble inert. I'm trying to make sure my hands are on the screen. So fat soluble, water soluble inert. And it does it in an ideal world. It does it in 2 successive phases that just happen. Boom, boom. Phase 1, you take the fat soluble item, you change it chemically, and you make it what's called a reactive intermediate. That reactive intermediate is a free radical. It is chemically active. It is more harmful than the initial state, but it's on its way to being water soluble. And it's just how you have to make it. Okay. That's phase 1. Most of us are super fast at phase 1, especially women. And then you go to phase 2. In phase 2, you take that free radical reactive intermediate and you bind it. There's 6 pathways your liver goes down, and you bind it to something that makes it inert and water soluble. And then you take it, put it in the bile, and put it in your poop so you can poop it out. There's a lot of places this could go wrong now.
Oh yeah.
So
You got 6
maybe you're
spots.
right, like, oops. So maybe phase one isn't so good because you're taking medications that impair it, or your diet doesn't have the minerals and nutrients that you need to have it go perfectly, or you have chronic illness and your liver is busy just keeping you alive, or you have diabetes or sugar dysfunction, whatever. You got something. It could be impaired in phase one. It could be impaired in phase two. Phase two is normally shorter. So you may just not be as fast. And because you have this free radical floating around, it freaks the body out. So the body's like, you are not welcome to have like free pass roaming everywhere. So your body says, okay, free radical, reactive intermediate, you are going to go hang out in the fat storage until we're ready to deal with you. So far, am I explaining this okay?
Yep.
You're with me? Okay.
Mhm.
Now, two things can happen. Either your body's like, oh, I have some brain space. Come on out. I'll deal with you. Or it just keeps getting piled up like Lucille Ball in the Candy episode where it just kept piling up. Think of that like the toxins. You
That
just
is
keep getting
exactly
exposed
a good one.
and you just can't get to it. You're like, wait, I can't get to it. I'm missing things. I can't get to it. So that's what happens as you start to get too much going on. Or if you layer on chronic illness or super stress, or you really like your alcohol, you drink a lot, or you have other endocrine disrupting things that you're being exposed to, or you get a big chemical exposure, you name it, the list goes on. You get in a car accident,
Right.
throw the system off. So if your body's busy, you won't take it from phase one to phase two. You'll take it from phase one to toxic intermediates and stick it in your attic, your junk drawer, until you can deal with it. Now let's assume it gets through phase one, toxic intermediate, and phase two, and now you're like, psych, you stick it in your gut. How many people have gut dysfunction? Everyone.
Everyone.
And then, so if you have constipation and it sits there longer, it's more likely for it to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Deconstructed. That I always think of it like, here's your binder and here's your hormone, and they're stuck together like a little barbell. Okay. Now, if you have an enzyme in your gut that's either overactive or it's just sitting there long enough that it gets around to it, that enzyme separates, cleaves your binder from your hormone. And guess what? When it's unbound, it's back to being a toxic reactive intermediate. And it's no longer water soluble. So it cannot stay in your gut, goes back in your bloodstream. Your liver's like, oh, I dealt with you already. Go back in the fat. And you just keep building fat. You can build unlimited fat.
Oh yeah.
Keeps going. There's no limit. You'll just keep making more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now let's go back, because you did say, I just had to geek out about that. So
No. And I think that was
now,
a good step back, because I think so many people like can't understand that's unexplained weight gain, right? You're like, you're not doing anything in particular. You're not mainlining ho-hos. You're just like, well, drinking wine out of the bottle. If you are, we can point to something, but it's these
right.
little things where it's
stop
like,
that first. If you
right.
are, stop that first. That's like a perfect low-hanging fruit.
Right. But many of us are like, I don't have any low-hanging fruit and I don't understand what's happening. And this is exactly what it is. We all have gut issues. So, maybe you are a good eliminator, and then it sits in your gut for too long. And then back to the beginning.
Yep. So, okay. So now when we go to what are the kinds of things that we're being exposed to that are endocrine disruptors? So the lowest hanging fruit, there's two. One is plastic water bottles, those disposable soft-sided ones that you have a case of sitting in your car. So when you're driving carpool or soccer or hockey or whatever, and the kids are like, I'm thirsty, you're like, grab it from the back seat.
Right.
Those, $5 for a case or $2.50 for a case. Don't buy those, because they're really toxic for you. Or in Boston, as we say, wicked toxic, wicked bad. So that's one really low hanging fruit. And then another is perchlorate, which is in a lot of our water systems to keep it from being toxic. But perchlorate is an endocrine disruptor. And endocrine essentially says any of those organs that make hormones, they're going to be thrown off by perchlorate. Damned if you do. You got to drink, right? But really, it's important to filter your water so that you don't drink perchlorate.
Right.
Other things. Sorry.
No. I that's great. The plastic water bottle thing, I think for so many people, that was like a, blow your brain, because it's like everyone had water in the car.
Yeah. I mean, it's tempting. It's easy. It's tempting. And I think the hardest part is like, how do we slow down enough to be able to
Mm,
make choices that work for us? Right. And so it takes something to say to your kids, bring an extra water bottle, fill it with water,
right.
make sure you're prepared, because part of the downside to living how we live is that we're so busy and we run around so much that we need easy fixes, right? Like
Right.
you're doomed if you don't have easy
Oh
fixes.
God, yeah. Everyone wants to hack.
Yeah, I don't blame them. We're so busy. So, okay, so those are two low-hanging fruits. The thing that broke my heart was the nail polish.
Yes.
I used to be a surgeon, so I have very good hand-eye precision, and so I used to take great pride in doing my nails every Sunday. Every Sunday night, I did my nails, and it would last me for the week, and then I'd redo it on the weekend, right? And
Right.
I would go to bed, and I would just keep my hands outside
Right.
my
To
thing.
not
I
smush
did,
up.
and I did it myself because if I do it and it chips, okay, but if I pay $50 and it chips, I'm going to be
You're
mad.
pissed, right?
So I was like, I'm going to do it myself. So I would do it every Sunday. And then I got my toxin screen back and the levels were high. And I was like, no, no,
Oh
like
God.
they looked so good. So now it's like, my nails are pretty healthy. And actually, the healthier I've gotten, the healthier my nails and hair have gotten.
Right.
So it's really marked and amazing to watch. So beauty products, nail polish,
Yeah.
shampoo, lotions, all of these things can contain substances that disrupt the endocrine system. And here's the thing, your body doesn't know anything different. When we say endocrine disruption, you're like, what difference does it make? It's because it looks like what your hormones are.
Right.
It binds to what your hormones are. And then you got to process twice as much or 3 times as much, whatever the
Right.
ratio is. It's because you have to process your hormones. You have to deal with the imbalance caused by the binding to the hormone receptors, and you have to process all of it. So your
Right.
body's like, oh, what's happening here?
Right.
There's too much.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because it's like the whole beauty product thing. I think for so many of us, that's the one that like punches us in the face. Because if you think about, you know, in any given day, like what you wash your body with, moisturize your body with, your hair, your teeth, makeup, it's just like,
Yep.
you're like, holy moly.
Yeah. Holy toxins, Batman.
Yeah, exactly. And that was, for me, the estrogen disruptors were a big thing for me because I was estrogen dominant. That like my body was like, girlfriend, we have too much. We do not
Mhm.
need any more. If you want to share it with the friends, do that.
They don't need it either.
Right. But it was like, and as as my doctor like kind of like unpacked, I was like, well, how did I get this? How did I get estrogen dominant? And he's like, well, what do you put on your body? I'm like, what do you mean? And I just like,
Yeah.
as he was like, I'm like, are you kidding me? And I'm like,
Mhm.
no one, like, I mean, nowadays you talk about paraffin, you talk about sulfites, you hear that more and more now, but 10 years ago, that was never a thing you
Yeah,
talked
no,
about.
no,
No
no,
one knew that.
100%.
I mean, the
No.
drug companies did, but we didn't know that.
They weren't sharing.
No, they were not sharing at all. And, as I've kind of like I said, I opened up the box and even though you wanted to shut it, you just had to keep going down the rabbit hole. And as I start to see more and more, documentaries of how bad the chemical companies knew this was and how much they tried to cover it up, it just blows my mind.
I'm sure they took a ticket out of the playbook for tobacco.
Yeah. Yeah. It just blows my mind that
No
I'm like,
question.
anything for a buck.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, and I think I mentioned I've been greenwashed, whitewashed, whatever it's called. I can't even tell you how many times I'll see an ad for something and I'm so happy. I'm like, oh, that looks great. I forget to check environmental working group because I'm rushing, I'm going
Right.
too fast. I buy it, it comes home, and I'm like, oh, crap, I got snookered again.
Right. And so speaking of that, you keep talking about environmental working groups. So let's talk
Yeah.
about what that is so that people can kind of start to, my goal here was just to kind of uncover to you. And it's sad if you're going to open up the box like I did and just kind of hop in, uh, is that I feel like the more you know, the more you know, the more you can do better, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't feel bad for what I did in the past, but it's like now I know better and I can make educated decisions.
Mhm.
And if you still love your favorite perfume after this, rock on with your bad self. But what is the environmental working group you talk about?
Yeah, so there's two sites that I love using to check the cleanliness of the products I'm buying. And they rate it for cancer causing allergies, um, uh, endocrine disrupting. They have a whole slew of things that they're evaluating it on. So environmental working group, ewg.org, and then Think Dirty is an app you can use. They both have apps, and I think both of them, you can scan the product or the UPC and it'll come right up. And it gives you a rating system. So I've aimed for 2 or 1. 1 and 2 for EWG is the best. It's the cleanest. Sometimes if something is a higher number, but it's a category that doesn't bother me. Like I'm not allergic to tea tree oil, and tea
Right,
tree oil gets a higher number because it's allergenic for some people, but that
right,
doesn't bother me. So
right,
I'll buy that.
right.
So you pick your battles for
Yeah,
what it is,
exactly.
but I aim for green. Go for the green.
Yeah. No, and you know, and you talk about being greenwash, whitewash, and I think it's very similar to back in I think it was like the late 80s, early 90s when things foods started getting like labeled on the front. And like it would either say like low fat or it would say like whole wheat. And that front package would like suck you in and you would grab it and be like, I'm doing great for my family. And then
Mhm.
you would get it home and you'd be like, oh, oh,
Oops.
oh, right. And so, I feel the same thing is happening now for products, right? They realize that we've become more educated about all of the various chemicals that are out there. And I think if they remove like one thing, they're like, they'll highlight it like, BPA free. And you're like, well, what else is the other shit you got in there?
Yeah, but they've replaced BPA with another. It's like BPC. It's just
Right.
as bad for you. It's just not BPA, which has gotten all the bad press.
Right. And the FDA is like, oh, no, no, you can't do BPA. But, like you could take off two chemicals and, now it's better.
Yeah, it's really pretty horrifying, Kim, because like I was researching the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is developed to keep us safe. And the whole system is flawed because companies are supposed to voluntarily tell the EPA, hey, we think there's a problem with our product. Can you take a look at it? So, okay,
Who's going to do
the,
that?
the fox is guarding the chicken coop here. Problem number one. Problem number two, it's totally underfunded. So they get, I don't know, they have like 5,000 that they're trying to evaluate. By just FYI, there's like 500,000 chemicals that we've developed.
Right.
Okay. So we're talking about a small fraction that they're going to evaluate. Of that small fraction, in their 50-year history, they were established like the year after I was born. I was born in 1970. I think they're like 1970, 71 to 74, somewhere in there. Tell me, how many products do you think they've outlawed and banned in their 50-year history?
I'm gonna go. I'm in my head. I'm gonna say 100, but I feel like I'm being generous.
You're very generous. Yeah, try again.
Probably,
Let's be less
probably,
generous.
probably like 20.
You're still too generous, actually.
Really?
Yeah, like jaw dropping. So they've banned 9 chemicals, 5 of which are basically the same.
Yeah.
So in 50 years, and that's not because the chemicals aren't harmful, it's because they don't have the funding, and it just, instead of proving something is safe, they have to prove something is harmful. So they
Right.
ban, and then by the way, the last one banned was 1984.
Well, and then I also think about one of the things that as I started to get deeper and deeper into nutrition, the generally regarded as safe, and
Mm,
so all of these chemicals, they're like, well, if you're only exposed to one billionth of a, millionth of a whatever,
yeah,
and but they don't ever take into account humans, you know.
right.
Um, so I remember I was taking a course, and the woman was talking about Pam, and she's like, Pam is only like she goes, this is what the directions say. The directions say like 130-second spray. If that's the serving size. And she goes, I had a client who was a big Pam believer. And so she's like, whatever. She's like, I got other battles to fight with you. And then she's like, well, how much Pam are you using? They were literally like spraying like half the can to deep fry food in Pam. And so she goes, now, do you think anyone at the FDA ever did that? Do you think anyone ever said, what is the worst thing someone could do with this product? Other than blow it up. Never thought of someone being like, I'm going to fry with it. And so these generally regarded as safe, they don't think that like someone's going to have 50 packets of whatever. And like, what does that do to you?
And how about the case where they measured that it was okay for that 1/1 billionth, but they didn't measure that 1/1 billionth in concert with the other 287 things we're exposed to in the course of a day.
Yeah.
So they can't even do these studies because they're just too intricate. But
right.
Maybe it's okay at really small numbers, but you're getting higher numbers and it's now being combined with other things, which means that the breadth and the depth and the impact, you have no idea what the impact is, and it's huge on us. I mean, you look at the incidence of autoimmunity, chronic diseases, degenerative diseases, cancer. Those are the 4 categories that catch our attention, and all of them have significantly risen over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
It's an epidemic.
It's crazy. And, the one thing I'm going to pick, 2 things I'm going to pick on that clearly there's something going on, because if you think about the prevalence of Alzheimer's or some variation of there, you don't really ever, when I was a kid, you never really heard anyone talk about Alzheimer's. You heard,
wasn't a thing.
Wasn't it?
You and I are the same age, right? Are you over 50?
Yeah. And we heard about memory issues, but like, I'm 95. Yeah.
Right.
I can barely remember things now, so I can only hazard a guess what's going to happen.
You'll be less stressed at 95. You'll remember more. You'll be like, man, those were the lost years, my 50s, but I remember everything now.
But give me an 80 lyric. I'm like, oh, that was from such and such song. But, you never, you heard about grandma being a little senile, but like she still had all of her faculties. It was just a few things she just couldn't remember.
We also died earlier, honestly. You think about, we're living a lot longer than people used to die at 65.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a chance to get demented because you didn't live long enough.
Right. True. I mean, if you made it to 80, you were in the bonus round.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we didn't talk about those things. And you're like, there's something going on because of that is causing our brains not to be able to fire on all cylinders. The 100%. Other thing I see a lot of is autism. Right? You never, when we were kids, you might have maybe one kid out of the entire school, maybe.
I didn't know anyone I knew some pretty big weirdos.
Right.
And I'm a townie,
But also maybe they weren't tested, but they were also they were the kid you're like, yeah, he's the crazy kid in the neighborhood. But you never it wasn't this like prevalence of it that you see nowadays. There wasn't even talk of spectrum.
No, there was none of that.
None of that. And I'm like, there has to be something going on in our bodies for us to be, talking about these 2 things on a regular basis.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, 100% agreed. No question.
So okay, people listen to this like, all right, Kim, you just like open Pandora's box to me. I apologize, but I got to do it. How would I go about saying to like we talked about earlier, it's an iterative process, right? It's not like go in your cupboards and toss everything. How do I go about, picking and choosing my battles?
I really like this conversation. So the first thing I'll say is, no woman is an island. Don't go it alone. Get someone in your corner who's there to cheer you on, whether that's an integrative functional medicine nutritionist or a naturopath or a functional medicine MD or DO. It doesn't really matter who you choose, as long as they're senior enough to know what they're doing and on your side, and that you resonate with them, right? Like, I've had some coaches, I'm like, this is not a good match. And then I've had some coaches, I'm like, I love you. I love how you talk is how I think. So find the right person, right? So don't go it alone, first of all. Second of all, recognize this is a process. You're never done. It's not like, oh, cool, I'm going to eat crap for the rest of my life because I did a good job for 10 years. No,
right.
No, you're going to tank yourself. Don't do that. It's a process. It's a constant improving, iterative process too. There's tons of stuff you can do on your own. So you can start to level up your food. You can start to level up your beauty products, your house, your furniture, air quality, air and water quality. A 1989 study by Massachusetts, I just happen to be from Massachusetts, but a 1989 study estimated that 1 in every 6 deaths was directly attributable to air or water quality.
Huh.
So yeah, it's huge. So fixing your air quality, fixing your water quality is extremely impactful. So filter your water, try to get your air as clean as possible, recognizing that for some communities, if you live near a highway or if you live near some kind of industrial plant, you can't change that, but you can change the indoor quality and keep the out. So high quality air filters, keep your windows closed, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, no, and I like that. I like that for many of us, I think it's just like you said, picking your battles and seeing how you feel,
Yeah.
because all of those people who can run out and be, Whole Foods, that's where you grocery shop, the whole for everything. It's hard for a lot of people.
It's expensive.
Right. It's expensive. And when I do go to Whole Foods and I see people pushing their cart, I'm like, what you got in there?
Yeah, it's I said that to one of the Whole Foods employees once. I said to her, I'm a little confused. You guys are all about like healthy living, and there's all this garbage that you sell. And she's like, she didn't miss a beat. She was like, well, our mission is to, and she rattled it off, but it was basically like provide amazing food and an amazing experience. So, they'll sell it if it doesn't have preservatives and artificial colors. Well, it's a
Yeah.
start, right? It's better than not. But I will say, we had a point that we went through about 7 years ago where we really went through a rough patch financially. And we had been at Whole Foods 100%. And when we went in that rough patch, I divorced Whole Foods. I was like, that's it. We are not doing this. We can't afford to. So we switched 100% over to we have Market Basket. I'm not sure if you have
Yeah.
that where you live.
I
So
live
we
in
have
Boston.
Oh, you do? Oh, we totally have to get together. Okay. So we switched over to Market Basket, and I literally shaved 50% off my bill, and I did a 1-for-1 replacement. So I did buy organic, the same things I was buying organic at Whole Foods.
Oh yeah.
And we literally shaved 50% off our grocery bill because I have 4 kids, like they like to eat every day.
I know.
So craziness, we had to feed them. So there are ways, like I think it deserves a moment to say, I really struggle with what's better, local versus organic. I have come down on the side of organic because it's just so hard to detox for me. But I understand if people opt for local versus organic, but do your best. But I would say go for, if you're on a budget, look for frozen food that's organic, is often significantly less expensive than the fresh variety. And it's been preserved. So as long as it stays frozen, you're in good shape.
Wait.
And get to know your local farmer, because we do a community supported agriculture, CSA, and it's 20 weeks and it's like $30 a week. And we did a double share, but it feeds our family for a week. So when you think
Yeah.
about, okay, $60 for vegetables for a week is actually really cheap. And
Right.
it's organic and it's local. So
Yeah.
it's also only 40% of the year. So we got the other 60% to deal with, but
Right.
it's a start.
And you mentioned something. So you said, how to detoxify. Is there, you hear about all of these cleanses and so forth. Is there,
Mm.
and then you also hear, other people say it's impossible to detoxify your body. Your body, doesn't need it. So what are things that people can already kind of say, like, that can help your liver to kind of start to?
I love this. Okay. So you are what you eat. So choose foods that are easy for your liver to utilize, and don't give your liver food that stresses it. This is the unpopular part. Alcohol
Right.
is really nasty for you, like really
Yeah.
bad for you. Don't drink. If you can get away with not drinking, don't drink, because it's bad for you. And it stresses your liver, which means if it's putting out a fire, it's not redecorating.
Right.
That's the only way I can say it.
I
So
love that.
don't drink alcohol. Make sure you're getting cruciferous vegetables, vitamin E, vitamin C, vitamin A, polyphenols, turmeric, carotenes. These are all things that help the liver, phase 1 and some of them phase 2, but mostly phase 1. And then for phase 2, if you're someone who eats animal products, eat flesh, because you get the critical amino acids that are supporting for detox. Eggs, cilantro, parsley. So the cardiologist earlier was like, so you eat a lot of cilantro? I'm like, no, I hate it, but I'll eat parsley.
Yeah. Cilantro is a love-hate.
Yes.
It's very binary. Either you do or you don't.
Yes. There's no neutrality. If it's in like small amounts, I'm okay. But if I can, it's like garlic. If I can overly identify it, I don't like it.
Yeah.
So cilantro, parsley, gelatin, bone broth, these are all things that support the liver.
Yeah.
Essentially, as Deanna Minnick talks about, like, eat the rainbow.
Yeah.
Eat brightly colored foods. Don't cook them to death. You cook them a little bit, especially with tomatoes, that brings out the lycopene in them. But and put some oil in it. It makes it absorb better. But like, don't kill your food.
Yeah. The only thing I need to cook within an inch of its life is Brussels sprouts.
What?
Brussels sprouts. I need to cook them within an inch of their life.
Yeah, I just don't like them. I don't like them. So I'll eat them if that's it. But normally I'm like, my husband makes it on his cooking day because I won't make them. I don't like them. I don't like how they smell. I don't like how they taste. And they don't cook up well for me. I don't know. I don't know if I screw it up or something.
Yeah, they always, like, no matter, they always smell. You can,
I don't like them.
You walk into your house the next day, you're like, yeah, we have Brussels sprouts.
And fish.
Yes. The two things that, like, no matter how many windows you put open, no matter how you cook it, the next day you always know when you had both of those.
Yep. 100%.
So, Dr. Wendie, you wrote this book, Dirty Girl, and I go out and read it because it's very eye-opening. In an hour, you can't really ever deep dive into this at all. Like, there's so many, like, this was like Pandora's box. It was like, what door couldn't I open with this? But you have your book, Dirty Girl. Yeah. So definitely go on Amazon. I'll also link it in the show notes. But I also, and if someone wants to work with you, are you actively taking patients or?
Yeah, we do. We do take patients. We have a functional medicine and wellness practice in Newton, Massachusetts, and we do telemedicine. And we do take insurance. So there's some things to navigate. Like, if you're not here, how do you establish care in a safe and legal way? So we work around that. We figure that out with you. And we also have a nutritionist that people can work with. 2 actually, and we have IVs and supplements. So our practice is called 5 Journeys, and that's FIVEJOURNEYS, and it's located in Massachusetts.
Perfect. And then I always ask all of my guests, what's one thing that makes you feel magical?
Yeah, I think the thing that really makes me when you say that, I think, what lights me up?
Yeah.
Right? And the thing for me, excuse me, that comes to mind is when I see my kids do something, like have a breakthrough in something they've really been struggling with, and get to that next level of who they are in their performance. That lights me up.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. I think it's interesting when you see kids and you're like, say like one day, like the light bulb goes on, and you never know when that light bulb's going to go on. Like, you kind of see it flicker, and then one day you're like, it's on. Yeah, that's really good. So, ladies, thank you so much. She's an expert on this right here. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many pathways you can go down, but definitely grab her book, because it's very enlightening. Like, for me, it's like, once you see something, you cannot see it, right? So then, it just, for me, I'm a deep diver. So I'm like, I deep dive. I'm like, I didn't even tell you how many documentaries I've watched about all of this. And, sometimes you scare the shit out of yourself. It's fine. But definitely grab her book.
We're doing a summit on this, actually, Kim. I forgot to mention it's airing in April, which is in April 2023, which is environmental toxicants, autoimmunity, and chronic diseases. It's really all about, like, how do you prevent and reverse them? But that's what our summit is on. That's what and we have a podcast too. I forgot to mention, it's the 5 Journeys podcast, Live Like You Matter.
Perfect. So definitely listen to the podcast, and for sure, like, block out that April date, because, those kind of summits, that's when I find, like, a lot of, like, my aha moments, because when people are just kind of talking off the cuff, that's when, like, these, like, random thoughts come out that they're like, doesn't everyone know that kind of thoughts come out?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I like most about attending those kind of summits. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon to speak with us, and grab her book. It's very enlightening.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for having me on. It's great.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you virtually, and I'll talk to you soon.